Fellow Ashlanders, there's a new podcast in town, The Bad Girl's Guide to Town Government. It's of the people, by the people, and for the people. An opportunity for citizens to express themselves on their own terms. And it happens right here in the information parlor at WACA-TV in Ashland. Before we get into today's absolutely riveting topics, we are going to start where we usually start, with Upbeat Corner.
Oh, thank you, Julie. I'd like to talk about briefly the Ashland Historical Society programs. Now, full disclosure, I was on the board and I am still a member. I'm obviously a proud member. That there's free educational topics October through April, 2 p.m. on Sundays. They're sometimes very local history by maybe a member of the society or someone in the community that speaks about. That will be next month about our cemetery. It might be someone who has a history of historical performances and bringing in. Last month, this last week, we had a full house, but it's free, and we'd love to have people come and enjoy that, learn about local history, learn about the house, and I think it's a good way to bring together people that share that commonality of enjoying history.
Yeah, and if you're new in town, you should check out the Ocean House, because it's got a lot of great examples of Ashland's history. That's where I first stumbled on History at Play, where she just does some amazing, and I saw one's coming up on April 12th, and it's a Wildwood Cemetery.
Yeah, so that'll be local historians giving us a talk about that. And while we're on local history, just want to make sure we mention that we think Jim Hanna is still here as a co-host in spirit, honoring, that we're trying to honor his caring about standing up for things you believe in, and even if it isn't what maybe you're hearing from town hall kind of things.
Yeah. Yep. Thank you, Jim. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the umbrella topic today will be democracies need checks and balances to thrive and survive. And should I do the quote?
Sure.
Okay, so Kate, do you want to read one or both of these quotes, and then we'll talk about it?
So we'd like to have references to some quotes and historical things, and a couple that we found on checks and balances. The American system of checks and balances is only as strong as the leaders who have the character and courage to enforce them. From Neera Tandon. The next one's interesting. It's actually from our James Madison, 4th President of the United States. It may be a reflection on human nature that such devices, meaning checks and balances, should be necessary to control the abuses of government. But what is government itself but the greatest of all reflections of human nature? If men were angels, no government would be necessary. And I think those both reinforce that we should stand, ask for, and demand strong checks and balances.
Yes, and I don't know, I kind of feel like we don't really have any checks and balances. But so you have the federal government with executive, judicial, and legislative, but on the local level, you have executive, which would be the select board, and the town, I don't know, the government, the select board, and probably the staff, and then you have the legislative, which is the people who come to town meeting. And I found this, for the filming portion, I found this organizational chart in the town of Medway, and they say, well, it says citizens of Medway, but we might call it residents. Residents of Ashland. I would love to see this. I've been trying to get an updated organizational chart for a couple of months now. But when I saw this, it just really reinforced to me that in that town anyways, the people are really seen at the top of the org chart. You might not think of that when you observe how some of our meetings are run. Kate, do you want to?
Well, I do think this is a great, because if you have that role as a legislature and part of the government, and, we're at the top of that, we do have responsibilities to speak up, to show up, to question, to understand. So we have to fulfill our part of that as
Right.
residents as well. I think
Mhm.
we can say that, and that's a great starting point, but if we never act on it, that could be a problem. And I think some of your other topics show how we might might make it difficult for us to act on that, though.
Okay, that sounds great. All right, so I just because we're into all things cultural and historical here, I've seen it before, and it just happened to be on TCM, and I watched Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and it's a Frank Capra movie, and it stars Jean Arthur, who's fabulous, and James Stewart, and then Claude Rains, if you're into some of the horror movies. He was in a lot of horror movies. So it's just this really awesome film about one of the senators dies, so then the governor of that state gets to send somebody in. So there was some corruption going on, so they're trying to find someone who wouldn't cause any problems. So the kids actually in the town said, you should pick Jefferson Smith, because he was head of the Boy Rangers, and they were all talking about nature and everything. So he appointed him, and then he got there, and he was walking around looking at, Abraham Lincoln and all the statues and everything. And then when he got into the Senate, he found out, almost by accident, he was trying to hide it from him, that there was actually land corruption going on, and they wanted to take some land that his state, and they never say which state he's from, wanted to turn it into like a national boys camp, so that this was filmed in 1939, by the way, and so he ends up doing the filibuster for 23 hours, and I've actually Googled it, and you're not supposed to even leave to go to the bathroom. I mean, you're supposed to dehydrate yourself, so you don't leave. And this was a talking filibuster, and he just talked. And then finally, one of the people, one of the other senators who he had always looked up to, just said, I'm terrible, I'm corrupt. And then he they ended up he was just trying to keep them from taking the vote.
So, and I think one point of that is how really one person can stand up, but it also got me thinking, what do we have as residents in local government? We don't have the equivalent of the filibuster. So I think that's an extreme case. You don't use it until extreme case, but I don't think we have anything like that.
Oh my God.
And so on the checks and balances side, we're at a little deficit there.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up, because it plays right into these other topics under the umbrella. Documents required by law, letting the people speak, and I've got some examples of what happened to me. The strong town manager form of government, spending without town meeting or select board approval. And anyways, all right, so documents required by law. So I enjoy talking to people. And if I see someone in another town doing citizen engagement stuff, or I see they've written a letter to the editor, or whatever, I will contact them. And so I'm so glad I did, because I learned from someone I met in another town that by state law, it's Chapter 40, Section 49, we are supposed to have an annual town report before, I believe, the annual.
Yeah, and that state law, it's interesting. I don't think it said, like, it didn't come with a table of contents, you shall include
Right.
this. But what we found was the examples we looked at, towns were very comprehensive. You could understand exactly the financial state, the hiring of those towns. And as someone who studies history, I also think it's an amazing document for that, historical. It's all in one place. And these, to me, those reports don't seem like extra work. They seem like it's just putting together a nice little thing, the work that everyone already does.
Yeah. What I found so fascinating, I looked at a whole bunch of them, and it was hard to find a town that didn't have one, except for us. That they had births and deaths and what they talked about at town meeting, but the most important thing that most all of them had was the salaries. They list all the salaries, and we have no idea what our salaries are
Well,
unless we
let's
ask.
be clear, I think what you're talking about is salaries by employee name,
Yeah.
and not a bucket, and not like,
Right.
this is how much we spend on salaries in this department.
Yeah.
It was per person, which, people can get upset about, but that is typical in public employment, that your salary is exposed. And I think that's okay, because that gives people an idea. So I do want to correct one point, because we don't know. I also looked on the town website. So we know for sure it's not in the town website, the annual report.
Right.
We haven't been sent one to our house, so we don't have that. Could it exist and just not be publicized and given to the public? We don't know.
Right. I was maybe, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years ago. I was in the library and the front room where the chairs are, and I noticed this little box. And I walked towards it, and it was filled with town annual reports
Awesome.
from like the 80s and the 70s and maybe up to 1990. But so then our previous town manager in 2014 mentioned that he was going to bring back the annual report.
The required by state law.
Yeah, to bring back the required report. And we had it for 1 year, but it did not have the salaries in it, because I don't know what is up with this town, but trying to get the salaries it can be very difficult. And I know in other towns, if they're not in the annual report, they're in the warrant, they're somewhere. They make it easy for you. So if we had one, I think it would be strange that 2 people who are actually alert couldn't find it. So anyways, I'm for anyone that watches this, and hopefully some of our leaders watch this or listen to this podcast, they can maybe look into it. It had like even down to what they spent on a project. And I mean,
Oh, I love the part about, this would be
I
super
bet.
helpful,
Yeah.
about the bonds. It's every bond,
Yes.
when it was started,
Yes.
when it's finishing, and
I
how
thought-
much is currently owed,
I thought-
and the interest rate. It was really, really simple, easy to understand.
yes, Medway had the bonds, the long-term debt, all the projects and what it was and the interest cost. And it just reminds me just how much we're actually in the dark here. I mean, we have these aggregate totals at town meeting, and no one knows what even makes it up. There's a few random categories, and I don't know. I really think we need to.
Well, there is that saying, right, information is power.
Oh my
And-
God, I'm gonna write that down.
So we do need the information. We want it, people want it. They're capable of making decisions, looking at it, and asking better questions when you have better data.
Yeah, I mean, my philosophy is, and I think it would make the clerk's office run far less, what do you call it, staff-wise. It would be easier for them if all this information that people keep asking for, that every other town has in their public reports, if it could be online, I think it would drastically reduce the time that people
I mean,
spend asking for
that's a good
things.
point, and they recently talked about charging, but maybe you have like, what's in the reports, you guide people there, and if they keep asking for something in the report, then maybe you charge them. You said you didn't look at the report, right?
Yeah.
So you could actually save money and time, I think.
Yeah.
And have people really be able to have a way to be more invested in understanding what's going on.
Yeah, and if you want an engaged citizenry, then they need information, because how can we interact with nothing just like the absence of anything. I don't even, a vacuum. We've been given the power to legislate, but we don't have basic information to even know what we're legislating. All right, so, all right, we have these action items too. I think that should be looked into about the annual report.
I think so. That's a
And
simple
If they're
thing.
done, fine, list them on the website.
Put them in the library.
Yeah, if they're not, where are they? And the Economic Development Revenue Fund is also supposed to have a required report. And I've tried for a long time to get it, and it's required, and again, it's crazy. There's another requirement, the capital.
Oh,
Yeah.
so, I mean, on the checks and balances, so I really did take to heart when we had this, nice chart from Medway, residents are at the top. I always have taken to heart about the legislative through town meeting. But the other checks and balances that the public should have is expectation of following the rules. So it tags along with, wait, we are supposed to be getting these things, we don't. Who is asking for them and holding accountable?
Mm-hmm.
Shame on us as the public if we don't ask. So that's one of the reasons we're here asking.
Yeah,
But we're supposed to have a capital improvement committee. That is citizens serving government.
right.
And that has not been reconstituted for quite some time. So I think that's sort of a problem. And I think when those rules are ignored, just like we're now out of sequence of reviewing the charter. Now, maybe there will be no changes out of the charter, maybe there will, but again, why are the public processes of checks and balances completely ignored in our town?
Yeah, I don't know. We're going to be talking about the type of government we have in a little bit. So, did you want to talk about Monson?
Well, when we were
just
talking about checks and
briefly.
balances, the moderator there, I was actually surprised because he wrote, a short essay on social media, which meant he was serious and he wanted people to try to look. And it was really, I don't know if I should read some, but he wanted people to be aware of how town meeting worked and how the finance committee worked. Okay, as of now, you're 2 months out from an annual town meeting. I thought it'd be a good time to go over some of my duties and responsibilities as moderator and those of the finance committee and put them in the form of public service posts on Facebook. Just as our federal government has separation of powers, the same is true of our state and local governments. For local governments, there's an executive branch and a legislative body. In Munson, that would be the same in Ashland. The executive branch are vested in select board, and the legislative powers are vested in town meeting. So he goes on to explain how the finance committee is under the legislative, and that should also be independent. He believes that's why it's appointed by the moderator in that town, also in our town. And so I think that just reiterates making sure that the finance committee is independent, working as the legislative, and not maybe just simply getting information from one source.
Yeah, that line just jumped out at me. Serve the interests of the voters rather than the executive administration, the select board. I really think it's time for the moderator, like all the other groups in town, come before the select board and talk about the process, how people are picked. I think that would be really educational. And speaking of educational, I would love to see a Citizens Academy run by the citizens, or at least have a part in the Citizens Academy, because it just, again, we've got the citizens sitting there, but when do they get to stand in front? And I mean, just regular people. So that's something to think about.
Yeah, I hope the select board, next time there's a Citizen Academy, will at least consider having a citizen component of that. Citizen groups, think different ways to be involved, how it all works.
Yeah, and I think once people understand how things work and the power they actually have, that they're going to be more likely to participate. Because if people think, oh, nothing I do matters, what would be their motivation to participate? But if they're like, wow, I do have power to help figure out how the town's going to look, or the zoning, or whatever, and not just when you're sitting in a town meeting when it's too late to do anything, I think that would be great. All right, so our next topic under the umbrella topic is letting the people speak. And I had some, I want to call them unfortunate experiences since we did the last podcast, where I was like invited to speak, and then I was cut off. I was interrupted, then cut off, and then I couldn't believe it, because we actually talked before last time about Barron versus Kalenda, and I know that they, at their open meeting law training that they had, I think it was in February, mid-February, they talked about that when there's public comment, and we can talk about that process too. Kate, you can talk about that. When there is a public comment, the idea is to let the people speak instead of, just trying to shut them down. Do you want to talk about the process of public comment?
Well, I think that we should do a better job of allowing it, saying when it's allowed, when it's not allowed, and why. And I think that they do need to take heart that Mass Supreme Court ruling, that people do get to say. Now, I mean, I think there has to be some measure of them. Like when I was on the planning board and there was basically Zoom bombing, that was just terrible. Like, do you allow racist and other things to occur? Generally, probably not, right? And so I think we can do a better job. If there was a well-defined process, people would understand if there's limits where they're coming from, right? That we try not to have people saying, for instance, racist things. We would, this could be very simple if we wrote and discussed as a town a policy that we agreed to, right? And I think the public does understand every meeting can't have public comment, right? That isn't what we're asking. We're asking that it's defined in a process, and the process is followed. And quite honestly, I think everyone knows the error should always be on let's hear from the public.
Oh, absolutely. That's such a great statement. And I remember talking to a previous moderator who always said to me that I wanted to err on the side of democracy. And I think we have a tendency in this town to err on the side of not democracy, efficiency.
Yeah, and people, the excuse would be efficiency, and I will not buy that. I'm sorry.
I mean, efficiency, that is just, you can be somewhat efficient, so it doesn't take 2 weeks, but people being told the comment is ending a town meeting when they're still sitting in their chairs. I mean, wouldn't the...
Well, and the legislators should we're the legislative body, we should get up and speak again. If you made a point that I agree or don't, it's okay.
Yeah.
I do think some of those, I feel like the time limit has helped some people feel like it goes better, whether it does or not. And I applaud, again, you up the time limit. That seems something people can live with, right?
We did a citizen's petition.
Yes.
Yep.
So I read some other towns are looking in and doing those things. So that, as a limit that we agree on, seems to be okay. But to say you can only speak once, who said that?
That was not in the citizen's petition at all. And my other comment too, and I know it happened before, you had some maybe senior citizens who have a little trouble moving. If you're gonna end the comments, it shouldn't be who's standing in line. It should be, if there's anyone who wants to come up, again, let's make this welcoming. Let's make this people feel like it really is the people's night. Hey, you want to come and talk about this? Can everyone get in line now? I'll give a couple minutes for people to get in line. I just think I know I keep saying this, but I think we need to do better. We need to just really want to hear from the people that live here. And since I've lived here, I don't think, it's very rare, like totally rare, if someone says something that maybe they probably shouldn't say or need to say. In general, people get up, they're very organized in their thoughts. And I was organized, I had written everything down, and I don't know. I just don't think there's a place for it. Oh, and of course, I just reminded myself, listening. So maybe the beginning of the 90s or so, I saw a course at Framingham State, and it was called Listening, and the Forgotten Skill. So I went to it because I said, well, I don't know, I know about hearing, but not necessarily listening. And it was probably one of the best classes I've ever taken. And this is an awesome book by Madeline Burley Allen, and it was like a bunch of arborists, me and a couple other people, and she did all these activities. She was absolutely fabulous. And it was clear that we weren't listening, even in the listening class. But I really learned, listening is actually an acquired skill. And I think it's one that's definitely in short supply in the town, because when we go to say something and we're shut down, I was told at one point, as I recall, that they were disagreeing with what I'm saying, but I get my couple of minutes, and then there's a disagreement with me instead of just listening to me.
So you've seen some of the Hopkins town meetings, and I noticed on their citizens' comment, their policy, again, process and policy,
Yeah.
is they don't comment live. They come back the next
Yes.
meeting and give a
The
response.
select
Now,
board meetings.
I'm not quite sure how that all works with
Yeah.
like open meeting law. Did they agree on an answer? Did they say one person answers? But it felt like, yes, they could actually listen because they weren't trying to respond on the spot.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that encourages listening. I have listened to some, I like to listen to the local other towns to see how they're organized, and I think they're actually organized pretty well. I noticed the people in Hopkinton, they're invited to come and sit at this table, and they are allowed to speak.
Mm-hmm.
They can speak. I've seen people speak for 5 minutes, even
The
longer.
one I saw did have a time limit. In fact, they brought 2 people.
Yeah.
So they said, if I hit my limit, I
Oh!
will go.
Oh my God, that is so ingenious.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why I thought it was longer, because there was 2 of them.
It was a similar topic.
Yeah, so anyways, it's just really refreshing. And I think, maybe we should take a look at ways to improve.
The process.
Yeah, improve the process instead of just yelling at us, whatever. All right, so the next one that is related is, and I'm gonna go back to page 1. It's our form of local government. So in 2007, and I was not at this town meeting, I was not able to be there. I don't know, maybe you were there. They changed the town meeting government from a regular town manager. Towns can have a town administrator, a town manager, and then the strong town manager form of government. And it took power away from the select board and ultimately the people, and just gave it to this strong town manager. And, you can see what they do. They can do a lot. They sign all the warrants. They can decide money will be spent, hiring, everything. And when I watch other select board meetings, it's apparent to me that they still maintain power. They're not in a position of just, asking. They're doing. So I don't know if you were at that 2007 meeting.
Probably, I miss very few, but I don't specifically remember that. But here's another thing. We can say I assume the advantages that when someone sold
Yeah.
strong town managers, that the select board are volunteer. They have full lives already. So it gives some relief to them of having more decisions. I can see that, but then when you do that, maybe there needs to be more oversight of like some citizens oversight. Like an example, a lot of police departments, right? if they're having issues with the public, they create a public oversight so people can feel heard about these things,
Yeah.
right? So I think there's ways to, I don't know that getting rid of strong town manager is entirely the answer based on how our select board's structured, right? It's not even, there are communities that pay, so then maybe someone could do it as a part-time job, but it's a
Yeah.
big ask, right? So I think we have to start there with the select board. What do they see pluses and minuses of that? But again, this goes back to, we talked about, if our government was following what we believe they're supposed to, we should have a charter review. It's written in the charter, how often you have it. And I did not look up I just know it's overdue to start the process. And I apologize, I did not look up, but so, though, we would be having those discussions as a community. And we should have those discussions. Like, maybe when we had it, everyone thought it was the greatest thing since sliced bread. We've had it for a while. We don't think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread anymore. What can be done?
Yeah, we need more opportunities to really listen, to what the people are saying, and.
And can I interrupt about that?
Sure.
While I'm not listening?
Yeah.
So I, as a resident of town, did not sub my civic duties to the select board.
Yeah.
And that is just the
Right.
truth. We need to be involved, and to be good members of the community and the legislature, you need to be involved. And so these things that continuously aren't done make it just much more difficult.
Yeah, I mean, we're almost done with our time here, because it's so much fun and so enjoyable. Speaking into these historic microphones that were from the original WACA-TV studio on Elliott Street, Paul Bodwin, who is our fabulous tech director, he was telling us about the history of these very fine microphones. Yeah, I think the whole town would just run more smoothly if we actually had processes that we follow. So we will be back. I don't think we even mentioned, your two co-hosts were Julie Nardone and
Kate Jerzyk,
I
and
didn't
we,
even mention that.
and I graciously accept the opportunity to be a co-host, and I would encourage other people interested to email questions, topics,
Yeah.
and co-host opportunities.
And it is badgirlsashland@gmail.com. Or if you see me around town, just say, hey, I want to talk to you about that. So anyways, we will see you in another month, I believe. And thank you for watching. We're now on Spotify and what was the other
Apple
one?
Podcasts.
Apple Podcasts. So we've made it to the big leagues. Thank you very much.